The Phantom Parallellium of the Shadows. Author, Othniel Max Daves. Introduction. In the twilight of our national woes, hostile forces, internal and external alike, have sown the seeds of destruction in the country. What America in its present entropic state has taught me is that hostile powers, within and without, have fostered a culture and society of provoking anxiety and anger. The resident confusion and ambiguities of its government and broader culture is one that creates sickness and dysfunction in order to make merchandise of people to sustain itself in an illusion of control. It's this illusion of control which it foists upon the people once again through machinations of mass cognitive bombardment of their minds, through binary polarization and diminutive shifting meant to further nurture greater confusion. Our culture does in fact manufacture and then exploit conditions which it uses to self-justify continuance in doing it. The mixed messaging of the micros and macros of society subtly diminishes and corrupts individual thinking to provoke triggered responses and external appearances. It then condemns while offering more false solutions, snake oil and faux cognitive ointments of methods to treat the symptoms for the very maladies it has planted, fostered, and then brought to maturation. It is very much a dark, parallel reality distortion machine which feeds on the manufactured maladies, while pretending at scale it has no idea what is occurring. That is the nature of the shadow telling the light it is dark. It is a clever attempt to continue to secure to itself the means and methods it deems necessary to maintain power, control and sustenance, devouring human flesh and energies. It is a domination system meant to obscure truth and freedom in the mirage of its counterfeits. It is a dark triadic model which first poisons, then enslaved and plunders to devour and destroy, after dividing with discord and strife sown in the minds and bodies of the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations. The American people are essentially in a multiplicity of various forms of imprisonment by this perversion to what it was meant to be. It is a culture captured by inversions and illusions, as well as a sense of hopelessness to change it being in a state of weariness, fear, and confusion. The parallellium, which I will call it here, is the darkness which, as the projective shadow, has waged war upon the authentic and real, attempting to force all into and under its various machinations and machines of domination. It is an insidious, obsidian force of evil and terror of being exposed as to what it truly is in its cognitive and spiritual crimes. It seeks to merge the spiritually impure with the pure spiritual essential. It works in the counterfeit parallelism of all things to then reverse the authentic and true into a subtle yet diminishing, corrupting mirroring of it. It does attempt to lure all into its distortions that it might enslave them to itself, rule over them in a myriad of deceptions in an attempt to prolong its existence and fortify itself against the inevitable will of God being brought to its fullness on earth as it is in heaven. For the former God of this world still pretend to be greater than its creator and force its delusion upon all peoples and nations by subterfuge, obscuration and machination in a mass abomination. This poisonous mix of deceptive lies has ancient roots and works in parallelism. It creates a parallel system by stealing from the real thing to create a counterfeit of it. No one does this more than the Middle East and Far East. It uses a form of the Hegelian dialectic as a method for this process of counterfeiting the real thing, that being the gospel of the kingdom of heaven. It then diverts believers and non-believers alike into its parallel shadow of the authentic. Thus we are at war against this dark power, which must relinquish its control of creation on earth as it already is in heaven. And for people, so too for the nations. Othniel Max Daves. Parallelism of the deceptive shadows. Society pursuing illusion or reality. As I ponder the world's complexities and its recurring problems, I can't help but notice a glaring oversight in our collective quest for progress. We seem to be caught in a cycle of failure, often pushing aside the very individuals and ideas that could lead us to genuine advancement. It's as if we prefer the illusion of reality to reality itself, and then wonder why everything falls apart. This preference for illusion over reality much like a moon eclipsing the sun, leads to inevitable darkness and chaos. Throughout history, every time humanity has made significant leaps in knowledge and inspiration, we've managed to corrupt these advancements. We deny the source of our inspiration, even as we attempt to forge ahead independently, transforming potential blessings into curses. This is the folly of our ways, a pattern that has repeated itself across generations, leading to the loss of what we've gained and what could have been. In my reflections, I see a world that curses the light, plunging itself into darkness. Our societies chase shadows, moving further from the light, until our kingdoms and nations crumble back to the dust from which they were formed. We build upon these ruins, only to repeat the same destructive cycles. Each generation acts bewildered by their predecessors' failures, yet deep down, we all know the truth. We consistently choose lies over truth, hatred over love, wrath over forgiveness, surrendering our souls and bodies to the very evils that ensure our downfall. Our history is a testament to this cycle of corruption and destruction. We take what is good and corrupt it. What is pure, we pollute. What is innocent, we pervert. What is sacred, we defile. Then, we lie to each other, pretending to be unaware of why everything turns to rubble, dust, and ash. Despite constant warnings and offers of salvation, explaining our actions and their consequences, we continue down this path of destruction, wondering why the world seems like a prelude to hell for some, and the height of absurdity and insanity for others. The root of this problem lies in the creation of deceptive parallels. This process, especially prevalent in regions like the Middle East and Far East, involves creating counterfeits of the real thing, most notably, the gospel of the kingdom of heaven through the Hegelian dialectic. This psychospiritual political strategy relies on mischaracterization, slander, and induced degeneration of the original, stealing from it to construct a false version in an attempt to replace the real with the counterfeit. This is the darkness engulfing our world, leading to its self-destruction. Thus, the state of our world reflects not just the actions of individuals, but the collective choices of nations. We are ensnared in the social contract of the lie, a pact that binds us to a cycle of failure and regression. Recognizing and breaking free from this contract is imperative if we are to find our way back to the light and reclaim the potential of our shared future. The labyrinth of human civilization. In the labyrinth of human civilization, the deceptive use of strategic and ideological parallelism emerges as a cunning artifice, leading masses into the shadows of reality rather than its substance. This phenomenon occurs when the essence of a profound truth or ideal is mirrored in a manner that distorts its core, creating a counterfeit that is eerily similar yet fundamentally different. This shadow, this mirage, entices with the promise of authenticity, yet delivers only a hollow echo of the original. At the heart of this deception is the manipulation of ideas and beliefs in a way that exploits our innate desire for truth and understanding. By crafting ideologies that mimic the real in form but not in spirit, those in power or those seeking to influence can divert the collective consciousness away from genuine enlightenment. This is not a mere accident of history. It is a deliberate strategy employed across epochs and cultures to maintain control, suppress dissent, and guide the masses along a predetermined path that benefits the few at the expense of the many. Consider, for instance, the way political and spiritual doctrines have been repurposed and repackaged to suit the agendas of those in control. The original teachings, which often advocate for love, unity, and forgiveness, are twisted into instruments of division, hatred, and control. The core message is lost, replaced by a version that superficially resembles the original but is devoid of its transformative power. This creates a society that believes it is following the path of righteousness when, in fact, it is marching further into darkness, the shadows of deceptive parallelism. This strategic parallelism relies heavily on the tools of mischaracterization and slander. By distorting the image of the real, By casting shadows upon its face, the counterfeit becomes more appealing, more accessible. The truth becomes something to be feared, misunderstood, and ultimately rejected. In its place stands a facsimile that offers comfort in familiarity. It is a trap that ensnares the spirit and intellect in chains of falsehood. The consequences of embracing these shadows are profound. As we wander further from the light of truth, we find ourselves in a world where values are inverted, where the sacred is profaned, and where the pursuit of genuine understanding is abandoned for the ease of received wisdom. This world is built on the sands of deception, and like any structure, lacking a solid foundation, it is doomed to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. Breaking free from the chains of strategic and ideological parallelism requires a return to critical thinking and a re-evaluation of the sources from which we derive our understanding of the world. It demands of us a willingness to question, to seek out the original light rather than settle for its reflections. Only by doing so can we hope to escape the shadowy realm of counterfeit truths and rediscover the path that leads to genuine enlightenment and progress. Navigating the shadows, the subtlety of deceptive parallelism. In the intricate dance of history and ideology, a toxic blend of deceptive narratives has woven its way through the fabric of societies, particularly pronounced in regions steeped in ancient traditions such as the Middle East and Far East. These narratives operate on a principle of parallelism, a cunning strategy that creates a counterfeit version of profound truths, notably the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, using the Hegelian dialectic as its methodology. This method thrives on the creation of a parallel system that, while mirroring the truth, distorts it to serve alternative purposes. The serpent's warfare, subversion below the surface. This strategy of deception is emblematic of below-the-threshold warfare, a method as ancient as the tale of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. It epitomizes the art of war without seeming to engage in combat as traditionally understood. Instead, it employs tactics of false peace and societal poisoning, using ideologies that atrophy from within, setting the stage for decay long before any visible signs of conflict appear. This insidious form of warfare manipulates information and influence, engaging in a cognitive battle against truth and perception. Much like the serpent's deceit of Eve with cunning words, a primordial instance of information warfare. Cognitive warfare, the battle for perception. At its core, all warfare hinges on the manipulation of information, a battle between truth and lies transmitted across various realms, seen and unseen, physical and spiritual. Perception warfare, a critical component of this struggle, acts as a subset of a broader threat matrix, aiming to disrupt and distort reality through fear, confusion, and deception. The ultimate consequence of this warfare is a meta-delusion, a collective departure from truth, driven by a lack of concern for, or love of, the truth. The antithesis of reality, political and media parallelism. The concept of antithesis, rooted in the Greek word antithonai meaning to oppose, plays a pivotal role in this landscape of deceptive parallelism. It is most effective when employed alongside parallelism, where the repetition of structure in successive phrases highlights the stark contrast in their content. This technique is not only a literary device, but a powerful tool in shaping political narratives and media portrayals, creating a dichotomy between reality and the constructed image of reality. In the realm of media, political parallelism reflects the extent to which media systems mirror political divisions, acting as a bridge between political actors and the public. The concept, explored in depth by Daniel C. Hallen and Paolo Mancini, categorizes media systems into three models based on their level of political parallelism, among other factors. This parallelism manifests in various ways, from the media's reflection of political orientations to the intertwined careers of media personnel and political actors. Such a system amplifies the division, reinforcing the divide between the real and the counterfeit, and perpetuating a cycle of misinformation and deception. Illuminating the path forward. The challenge we face in navigating this landscape of shadows is profound. The deceptive use of strategic and ideological parallelism has deeply entrenched itself in the fabric of our societies, masquerading as truth while leading us further into darkness. Recognizing and understanding these tactics is the first step toward illumination. By critically examining the sources of our information and questioning the narratives presented to us, we can begin to discern the real from the counterfeit, paving the way for a return to genuine understanding and enlightenment. In doing so, we must strive to rebuild our societies on the foundation of truth, rather than the shifting sands of deception and manipulation. In the vast theater of human endeavor, the echoes of past mistakes often resound in the corridors of the present, a haunting melody that speaks to the infernal futilities of pride and day. This cyclical dance, where individuals and nation-states tirelessly repurpose failed strategies without understanding their inherent flaws, illuminates a purgatory of folly. It's a grand stage where the addiction to control, disguised as innovation, reveals a disturbing truth. Just as a lie parasitically requires truth for its existence, addiction feeds not on the addicted but rather ensnares them in a web of dependency, creating a perverse symbiosis where the spirit of addiction is, ironically, dependent on the addict. This pattern is not confined to personal vices, but extends to the geopolitical strategies of nations, where creating dependencies, essentially addictions, becomes a means of control. This methodology, rooted in pride and fueled by fear and confusion, mirrors the tactics of a drug dealer or a shadow, entities that cannot exist independently and thus resort to deception and entrapment. This cycle of addiction, reflective of the nature of the beast or dragon in mythological terms, underscores a fundamental truth. Pride inevitably precedes a fall, blinded by its refusal to acknowledge its own dependencies. The predicaments faced by America and the global community at large are largely self-inflicted, a direct consequence of being ensnared by lies. This realization echoes the wisdom of ancient proverbs, warning of paths that seem right yet lead to destruction and the peril of a people without visionary leadership. The cyclical nature of these issues underscores a profound disconnect from learning from the past, thereby dooming societies to repeat it. Dante's Divine Comedy provides a poignant metaphor for this phenomenon, particularly in the depiction of sinners in the Inferno, who suffer punishments that mirror their earthly sins. For instance, fortune-tellers and soothsayers, condemned to walk backward with their heads turned away from their forward path, symbolize the intellectual, moral, and spiritual regression inherent in failing to learn from history. They sought to see the future, yet in their punishment, they can no longer see the path ahead, emblematic of societies that, in their stubbornness and denial, fail to envision a future beyond the reiteration of past failures. Futilitudes of self-destruction. This brings us to the concept of futilitude, a state of existence mired in unproductive, self-destructive cycles. This condition arises from a failure to recognize the inherent corruption and inadequacy of past strategies, leading to a deluded belief in their potential for success through mere repackaging. Individuals and nations alike fall into this trap, believing that the failures of the past were not due to the flawed nature of their strategies, but to external circumstances or poor execution. This refusal to acknowledge the original mistakes only compounds them, ensnaring societies in a loop of pride, arrogance, and denial. The similarity and analogy between historical and contemporary failures reveal a distressing pattern, a resemblance that goes beyond surface appearances to the very core of human action and thought. Despite the apparent novelty of these repackaged strategies, they are fundamentally corrupted iterations of past failures, doomed to yield the same fruitless outcomes. The infernal futilitudes of pride and denial. Why history reruns in rhymes. The infernal futilitudes of pride and denial. Why history reruns in rhymes. The purgatorium of folly is seen in how so many individuals and even nation-states engage in a futile repackaging of previously failed machinations, never really comprehending why it is they failed to begin with. and thus continue to rerun the cycles of it in their pride and denial. These same ones then attempt to foist their delusions upon all the flesh of peoples, tribes and nations in machinations intended to deceive and enslave them to themselves. This is a grand example of the nature of addiction, and that which exploits it from micros to macros. The addiction needs a host. The host then becomes a slave to it. Just as a lie needs truth, though it denies it, so too the addiction needs the addicted person to exist. Hence, the actual reality of addiction is that the spirit of it is addicted to the addict, yet deceives the addict. It is the other way around. Just as a lie, because it is such. The spirit behind China's strategy is like those of many other nations. Its intent is that of creating dependence, in other words, addiction, which is control and enslavement, not is born of pride, fear, and confusion. Like that of the drug dealer, or even the shadow, they cannot survive on their own, thus they endeavor to tempt, deceive, and ensnare, to control and devour. This is essentially an addiction cycle. It is also the nature of the beast, the dragon and Satan. Pride comes before a fall, and pride cannot admit that it is actually dependent upon the very thing it attempts to reverse on the authentic, in order to remain viable in its deceptions and lies. Hence why I tell you that the counterfeits will never suffice to extricate you from the very predicament they actually created to deceive you into dependence on. Your problems here in America and around the world are self-inflicted wounds born of being deceived by lies. Hence why we say there is a way which seems right, but it is actually the broad path to destruction. Likewise, why we also say that where the leaders have no vision, the people perish. As for people, so too for nations. In Dante's Divine Comedy, each sin's punishment in Inferno is a contrapasso, a symbolic instance of poetic justice. For example, in Canto XX, fortune-tellers and soothsayers must walk with their heads on backwards, unable to see what is ahead, because that was what they had tried to do in life. They had their faces twisted toward their haunches and found it necessary to walk backward, because they could not see ahead of them. And since he wanted so to see ahead, he looks behind and walks a backward path. This example of intellectual, moral, and spiritual retrograding is an appropriate metaphor for regression back to old playbooks or patterns of thought, giving rise to behaviors and the resulting actions taken by people and even nations that contribute to the rerunning of history in cycles of repeating rhymes. What I mean by this is that they resurrect the failed means and methods of the past, dressing them up in the clothing of the present language and appearances, attempting to find success in what was and is already a failure, in an exercise of futility, having no vision to see beyond their present darkness into the near and far-field future. Thus they recreate their defeat and failures in cyclical denial of the past in their present predicament. It is in effect a polymorphic dynamic lock which has imprisoned them to the endless reruns, which with each turning only weakens their external effect, while exponentially strengthening its hold upon those in its grasps. Here we see what I call a futilitude. From futility and similitude, being a state of existence locked into unproductive and even torturous self-destructive cyclical patterns of likeness that implies a closer correspondence than similarity, which often implies that things are merely somewhat alike, yet with no chance of ever finding a different outcome other than failure as a counterfeit of the authentic thing. The similarity between the two cases, resemblance, implies similarity chiefly in appearance or external qualities. Statements that bear little resemblance to the truth. A similitude applies chiefly to correspondence between abstractions. Two schools of social thought showing points of similitude. Analogy implies likeness or parallelism in relations, rather than in appearance or qualities, yet with the same failed outcomes. People in a futilitude are engaged in inherently a corruption of a corruption. Being that they cannot see the errors of the implementations of past cycles, they think wrongly that their own version of it will in fact make it work, and that the reason the prior incarnation of the concept, ideology, or behavior-driven action failed was not due to its insufficient and corruptedness to begin with, but rather was due to external forces and poor implementations of it previously. Thus they compound the original errors and corruption, denying them and being blind to them in pride and arrogance, consigning them to make the same errors all those before made in their own pride, arrogance, and denial. Hence why it a futile effort. Hence why their similitude of the prior failed state of outcomes is merely a repackaging in folly of their present delusions. As for people, so too for nations. In the end, the infernal futilities of pride and denial serve as a stark reminder that without a genuine re-evaluation of our past and a sincere effort to learn from it, individuals and nations are destined to perpetuate the same mistakes. This cyclical pattern, underscored by a stubborn refusal to confront and rectify foundational errors, illustrates a profound truth. As with individuals, so too with nations, the path to true progress lies not in the repetition of past failures, but in the courageous willingness to forge new paths enlightened by the wisdom of hindsight, unrestricted diversion and deception. The concept of unrestricted warfare underscores a timeless strategy that transcends cultures and epochs, embedding itself in the fabric of human conflict. This approach, characterized by its lack of boundaries and rules, targets the multifaceted dimensions of society and governance, exploiting vulnerabilities far beyond the conventional battlefield. The ancient roots of this strategy can be traced back to the earliest forms of conflict, where cunning and deception were as pivotal to victory as strength and valor. Ancient origins and evolution. The narrative of the serpent, known for its cunning and subtlety, serves as a metaphorical inception of unrestricted warfare, highlighting the use of deception and subterfuge in achieving objectives. This allegory underscores a fundamental aspect of human conflict, the employment of tactics that leverage psychological, social, and economic pressures to undermine an opponent, often before physical confrontation ensues. Modern implementations. In contemporary contexts, nations like Iran, along with its proxies and various terrorist groups, have adopted and adapted the principles of unrestricted warfare to further their strategic goals. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, for example, has long embraced a multifaceted approach to conflict that extends beyond traditional military engagements, targeting the societal, economic, and political infrastructures of their adversaries, notably the US and Israel. The role of technology and information. With the advent of digital, technology and social media, the means and methods of unrestricted warfare have evolved, enabling state and non-state actors to conduct malign influence operations with unprecedented reach and precision. These operations often aim to sow discord, manipulate public perception, and destabilize societal structures, effectively turning populations against themselves or their governments. Supranational influence and the United Nations. Supranational organizations, like the United Nations, have also been arenas where the tactics of unrestricted warfare are manifested, albeit in more nuanced and diplomatic forms. Through influence and policy manipulation, actors can shape international discourse and decisions to align with their strategic interests, often under the guise of global cooperation and goodwill. The challenge of perception and awareness. The greatest challenge in countering unrestricted warfare lies in its inherently deceptive nature, which operates below the threshold of conventional awareness. The complexity and subtlety of these strategies require a high degree of discernment and a deep understanding of one's own vulnerabilities and those of the adversary. This calls for a holistic approach to security and defense, encompassing not just military capabilities, but also the resilience of societal, economic, and political institutions. A call for comprehensive vigilance. As the lines between war and peace continue to blur, the principles of unrestricted warfare serve as a reminder of the need for a comprehensive and vigilant approach to security. Understanding the multifaceted nature of modern conflict, recognizing the signs of covert aggression, and fostering resilience against such tactics are essential steps in safeguarding national interests and global stability. In essence, the ancient strategy of leveraging human nature's corruption and susceptibility to deception against itself remains a potent threat, Recognizing and countering this threat requires not just strength, but wisdom, adaptability, and a profound understanding of both oneself and the adversary. As history shows, the stakes of unrestricted warfare extend far beyond the battlefield, impacting the very fabric of societies and nations. The essence of our discourse, spanning the ancient roots of unrestricted warfare to the infernal futilities of pride and denial, converges on a singular, profound truth. Both individuals and nations are perennially ensnared in the shadows of authenticity by a formidable and subtle force. This force, a complex web of spiritual and strategic parallelism, operates by crafting illusions that mimic truth and authenticity, thereby diverting humanity through a labyrinth of lies, fear, confusion, and machinations. This method, ancient yet ever-evolving, leverages the inherent vulnerabilities within human nature and societal constructs, exploiting them to orchestrate wide-ranging outcomes that serve the interests of a few while ensnaring many. The shadow of authenticity. At the heart of this deception lies the concept of the shadow of the authentic, where the counterfeit is presented in a guise so closely resembling the genuine that discernment becomes exceedingly difficult. This shadow, however, is devoid of the substance and essence that give the authentic its value and power. Instead, it serves to mislead, offering a distorted reflection that appeals to the desires, fears, and aspirations of humanity, yet ultimately leads away from truth and enlightenment. Spiritual and strategic parallelism. The tactics of spiritual and strategic parallelism are not merely tools of political or military strategy, they are woven into the fabric of societal manipulation and control. This form of parallelism creates a dual reality where the superficially convincing masks the fundamentally corrupt. It is a dance of shadows, where the semblance of truth is used to obscure and replace the authentic, manipulating beliefs, values, and perceptions at the deepest levels of human consciousness. The role of fear and confusion. Fear and confusion are the twin pillars upon which the house of deception stands. By sowing seeds of fear, those who wield this strategy can manipulate individuals and nations into surrendering their autonomy, principles, and pursuit of truth in exchange for the illusion of security and order. Confusion, meanwhile, fractures the ability to think critically and discern wisely, leaving populations vulnerable to further manipulation and control. In this fog of uncertainty, the shadow appears as substance and lies parade as truth. Unrestricted warfare as a microcosm. The concept of unrestricted warfare emerges as a microcosm of this broader strategy of deception. By transcending conventional boundaries of conflict, it embodies the essence of strategic parallelism, leveraging every facet of human interaction, from the economic to the digital, to wage war in the shadows. This approach capitalizes on the complexities and interconnectedness of the modern world, weaponizing information, technology, and social structures to achieve dominance not through direct confrontation, but through the erosion of will, unity, and clarity. The path to discernment. Countering this pervasive deception demands a return to foundational truths and values, an elevation of critical thinking, and a recommitment to principles of authenticity and integrity. It requires the cultivation of discernment, a keen, practiced ability to recognize the genuine amidst the counterfeit, to see beyond the surface, and to question the narratives and ideologies that shape our world. A call for authenticity and awareness. In an era where the shadows grow ever more convincing, the call for authenticity and awareness becomes increasingly urgent. Individuals and nations alike must awaken to the subtle manipulations that seek to divert them from the path of truth, embracing a vigilant pursuit of authenticity in thought, action, and spirit. By shedding light on the shadows, we can begin to dismantle the illusions that bind us, charting a course toward a future grounded in truth, wisdom, and genuine progress. The dark art of misdirection. The art of misdirection, a practice as ancient as the craft of the magician itself, serves as a poignant metaphor for understanding the myriad ways in which individuals and nations are led astray from authenticity and truth. This concept, deeply rooted in the realms of illusion, diversion, and cognitive manipulation, extends far beyond the stage, infiltrating the very fabric of societal and political discourse. It reveals a sophisticated mechanism of influence that operates not only on the perceptual and sensory level, but also at the core of our cognitive and emotional processing. The mechanics of misdirection. At its essence, misdirection leverages the human capacity for attention and the limitations therein, directing it towards the inconsequential to conceal the consequential. This manipulation is not merely about deceiving the eye, but more critically, about ensnaring the mind. It involves a complex interplay of perception, memory, and reasoning, where the audience is led to question their understanding of reality. By controlling what individuals see, remember, and deduce, the illusionist crafts a narrative that is compelling yet fundamentally false, strategic, and spiritual. This deceptive practice finds its parallel in the strategic and spiritual manipulation employed by states, institutions, and influential actors on the global stage. Just as a magician uses misdirection to achieve an impossible effect, political and social actors use strategic parallelism to divert public attention from their true actions or intentions. Through the orchestration of events, narratives, and even crises, they manipulate public perception, memory, and reasoning to shape the geopolitical landscape to their advantage. Cognitive blindness and bias. The phenomenon of change blindness, where significant alterations within a scene go unnoticed, mirrors the public's often oblivious response to gradual but profound shifts in policy, social norms, or political climates. This cognitive limitation is exploited to introduce controversial or detrimental changes with minimal outcry, as the collective gaze is fixated elsewhere by design. Confirmation bias further entrenches these manipulations, leading individuals to interpret or recall information in a way that confirms their preconceptions, thus perpetuating a cycle of deception and misunderstanding. This bias is strategically fed by presenting manufactured evidence or staged events, steering public opinion and judicial proceedings along a desired trajectory. The diverse means of diversion. The concept of diversion, with its roots in turning aside from a course, is emblematic of the broader strategy to divert societies from the pursuit of truth and unity. The etymology of diversity itself, suggesting a turn towards division and separation, underscores the potential for such concepts to be weaponized in fostering division under the guise of variety and individuality. Biblical wisdom cautions against deviation from the path of righteousness, warning of the perils of turning to the right or left. This ancient guidance resonates today, urging vigilance against being led astray by falsehoods and the whims of those who would manipulate truth for their own ends. The consequences of deception. The stakes of succumbing to these illusions are profound, both for individuals and nations. As we navigate the complexities of the modern world, the admonition to remain steadfast and discerning becomes ever more pertinent. The costs of deception, born out of fear, confusion, pride, and corruption, are not only personal but can ripple through societies, leading to division, strife, and the erosion of communal integrity. In conclusion, the art of misdirection, both on the stage and in the sphere of global affairs, illuminates the intricate dance between perception and reality. It serves as a reminder of the need for critical thinking, awareness, and a steadfast commitment to truth. As we seek to unravel the illusions that bind us, we must cultivate the discernment to see beyond the spectacle, recognizing the profound impact of these deceptions on our lives and our world. Strategic framework. The cycle of deception. The cycle of deception that ensnares both individuals and nations operates through a meticulously crafted strategy designed to undermine societal cohesion and rational discourse. This strategy, articulated through the triggered response modality, evolves in stages, each compounding the effect of the last to gradually reshape perceptions, beliefs, and ultimately, behaviors. 1. Distort. The process begins with the distortion of information, where facts are twisted and context is manipulated to sow the seeds of confusion. 2. Deceive. Through distortion, the groundwork is laid for deception, creating narratives that diverge significantly from reality but are presented as truth. 3. Distrust. Deception breeds distrust, not only in specific messages or narratives, but in the institutions and frameworks that traditionally mediate truth and falsehood. 4. Divert. With distrust as a backdrop, attention can then be diverted from critical issues that require collective understanding and action, focusing instead on manufactured crises or irrelevant controversies. 5. Divide. Diversion leads to division, fracturing society along lines of manipulated identities, beliefs, or opinions, eroding the common ground necessary for collective decision. 6. Degrade. The division degrades critical thinking, as individuals retreat into echo chambers that reinforce existing biases and preclude the exchange of ideas. 7. Dependence. In this fragmented landscape, there is a growing dependence on misleading sources of information that affirm one's worldview, further distancing individuals from objective truth. 8. Devour and destroy. This dependence sets the stage for the devouring and destruction of truth, as the lines between fact and fiction blur, making objective reality increasingly inaccessible. 9. Dominate. The culmination of this cycle is domination, where those who have mastered the art of deception wield disproportionate power over the narrative, shaping not only public discourse, but the very fabric of reality itself. Christian worldview. A spiritual perspective. From a Christian worldview, this strategic framework of deception mirrors the spiritual battle described in Ephesians 6:12, where the struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, authorities, and powers of this dark world. The triggered response modality can be seen as a manifestation of the enemy's tactics to steal, kill, and destroy. John 10:10. The foundational truths upon which both individual faith and societal harmony are built. 1. Distort and deceive. The serpent's distortion of God's word in the Garden of Eden. Genesis 3:1 is the archetypal act of deception, illustrating how slight distortions can lead to profound consequences. 2. Distrust. This deception erodes trust in God's goodness and promises, mirroring the distrust sown in societal institutions and fellow humans. 3. Divert and divide. Just as the enemy seeks to divert attention from God's truth and divide humanity through sin, societal diversion and division fracture the collective body, undermining its strength and unity. 4. Degrade. The degradation of critical thinking and moral discernment reflects the biblical warning against being conformed to the patterns of this world. Romans 12:2, encouraging a renewal of the mind in Christ. 5. Dependence. The call to dependence on misleading sources parallels the biblical caution against false prophets and teachers who distort the truth. Tito 2:1-3. 6. Devour and destroy. The enemy's aim to devour and destroy truth echoes the destructive outcomes of sin, which separates humanity from God and each other. 7. Dominate. Ultimately, the aim of spiritual warfare is domination, seeking to establish a throne of lies that challenges God's sovereignty and truth. A call to vigilance and faith. In both the strategic and spiritual realms, the triggered response modality serves as a clarion call to vigilance and discernment. Strategically, it highlights the need for societies to cultivate resilience against manipulation, fostering environments where truth can flourish. Spiritually, it underscores the importance of grounding oneself in the Word of God, wearing the full armor of God, Ephesians 6:11, to stand against the schemes of the devil. In navigating these deceptive landscapes, both individually and collectively, the call is to remain anchored in truth, seeking wisdom and guidance from above to discern the shadows from the light. In the vast expanse of human history and spiritual inquiry, the intricate dance of deception and truth plays out on a stage as vast as the world itself and as intimate as the human heart. The strategic framework of deception, with its calculated steps designed to undermine societal cohesion and individual discernment, mirrors the spiritual battle waged across the ages, a battle that seeks to divert humanity from the path of authentic truth and into the shadows of falsehood and division. Through the lens of the triggered response modality, we've traced the arc of distortion, deception, and division that plagues societies and individuals alike, revealing a pattern that is as destructive as it is pervasive. This strategic deception not only fractures communities and erodes the foundations of trust, but also insidiously undermines the very essence of what it means to be created in the image of truth. Yet, in the reflections of this worldly strategy, the Christian worldview illuminates a path of resistance grounded in the eternal struggle between light and darkness, between the fleeting shadows of deception and the enduring light of divine truth. The conclusion of our exploration brings us to a crossroads of choice and awareness. On one hand lies the continuation of the cycle of deception, a cycle that, left unchecked, promises to deepen the divides, dull the critical faculties, and further enslave hearts and minds to the illusions of power and separation. On the other hand, stands the invitation to awaken to the tactics employed against both the collective consciousness of nations and the individual souls of their citizens. This awakening calls for a vigilance that is both strategic and spiritual, demanding a discernment that sees beyond the surface and seeks the truth with both the mind and the heart. As individuals and as societies, we are called to arm ourselves not with weapons of division, but with the armor of faith, truth, righteousness, peace, faith, salvation, and the Word of God. Ephesians 6. It is through these that we can withstand the onslaught of deception, discerning the truth in a world awash in the shadows of misdirection. This is not merely a call to personal enlightenment, but a collective mandate to rebuild the fractured foundations of our communities, guided by principles that transcend the temporal. And, in this moment of reflection, let us resolve to step beyond the cycles of distortion and division, to embrace a path of unity, integrity, and love. Let us commit to a journey of healing, grounded in the truth that liberates and unites. For in the end, it is not through dominance or deception that we will find our way, but through the humble pursuit of truth, illuminated by the light of Christ and the unwavering hope of redemption and reconciliation. As for people, so too for the nation and nations. In recognizing the shadows cast by strategic and spiritual deception, we hold the power to turn back towards the light, to forge a future defined not by division, but by the shared pursuit of a higher truth. In this endeavor, we are not merely passive observers but active participants, co-creators of a reality rooted in the authentic and the true, emboldened by the spirit of discernment and the courage to confront the darkness with the light of understanding and faith. As for people, so too for the nation and nations.